We are going to turn now to our Grace King, who is here in the studio. And Grace, you've been covering a tough story too, but an important story, the case of Colin Gray, the father of the accused Apalachee High School shooter. He's getting ready to go to trial.
Trial starts Monday with jury selection. Jury selection will be in Hall County. Obviously, like you said, this is a tough case. Everyone in Barrow County is very close to it. It's a very close-knit community. So they're going to go to Hall County rather on Monday to try and find those 12 impartial jurors, probably plus or minus some plus some alternates, and that's going to be the start of the case.
And this is, if you live in Georgia, if you live in Metro Atlanta, if you live in North Georgia, you remember this, of course, but this is the Apalachee High School shooting back in 2024. 4 people were killed, a number of others were injured. Colt Gray is the accused shooter in that case. Colin Gray is his father, and prosecutors have brought charges against Colt Gray, but also his father, Colin Gray, here, in what legal observers have said is a pretty novel legal theory to charge the parent of an accused school shooter. How did they get to this point?
We've seen this once before in Michigan. That's it. So we don't really know what's to come, how this is going to play out. It's never happened before in Georgia. They're basically using the theory that Colin Gray's reckless conduct is kind of the underlying factor, contributed to this murders. The sheriff has told us that the rifle used in the shooting was a Christmas gift to his son. There were some prior concerns about his son's mental health history of violence, etc. There have been some prior school shooting threats. The catch is we don't know what evidence prosecutors have, how specific some of that evidence is in terms of what threats were made, what his father knew, how credible his father thought it to be. But I spoke with former DeKalb County District Attorney Robert James earlier, and he kind of helped me break down what to see at trial.
When jury selection begins Monday, it won't take place in Barrow County.
Imagine trying to find 12 impartial citizens who have not been affected by this directly or indirectly.
Instead, Judge Nicholas Prim will temporarily take the bench in Hall County.
You have to take this to a new county where you have a new crop of jurors that can be fair and impartial so that the defendant's constitutional rights are guaranteed.
Robert James is the former DeKalb County District Attorney who now works as a private defense attorney. He's not representing anyone in this case, but is curious to see how it plays out. The indictment charges Colin Gray with 29 counts, including second-degree murder, saying he, quote, consciously disregarded a substantial and unjustifiable risk by allowing his son, Colt Gray, access to a firearm and ammunition after receiving sufficient warning that Colt would endanger the bodily safety of another.
The more specific the warning the father had, and the more warnings that were available to the father or that the father got, right, the better the state's case.
On September 4th, 2024, authorities say Colt opened fire inside Apalachee High, killing 4 and wounding 9. Now, jurors will have to decide whether Colin Gray should be criminally responsible for that tragedy.
It's a very novel and new, extraordinary, even legal concept, right? It's very aggressive. We've not seen anything like this in Georgia.
In Barrow County, Grace King, 11 Alive News.
And important to point out here as well, Colin Gray has pleaded not guilty. Again, we're getting ready for this trial to commence on Monday. Juror selection will be the first phase of this trial. Grace, I would imagine that alone is going to be a challenge to be able to seat an unbiased jury, even after the change of venue.
Yeah, Hall County, in all reality, isn't that far away from Barrow County. Colin's defense attorneys have long fought the court. They were unsuccessful, that Hall County was not far enough. They were hoping to bring the trial kind of near the Georgia-Florida border or Savannah area, just so it was far enough away that the media exposure, the communities aren't so intertwined. The defense attorney, or the prosecutors rather, had suggested something like Walton County, which is basically on the line with Apalachee High School. And the judge said, no, that's too close. Well, let's go to Hall County. It's a similar demographic of Barrow County, which is important to consider when you're changing where the jurors will come from. Let's go to Hall County. It's a bit more removed than Walton County, similar size, similar demographics, similar political leanings. They all look to find a jury pool that will be similar to the county where the trial will be held.
And you talk about the efforts of the defense to move the case even further away from Barrow. They didn't make it all the way to the coast or to the southern tip of Georgia. They got to Hall County. What else has the defense raised in terms of early defenses to these charges?
They have a lot of concerns about statements Colin Gray had made to investigators in the aftermath of this shooting. Of course, Colin knew his son Colt was under investigation for this. He was like, what's happened to my son? He runs out in the body camera and he's just saying, where is my son? Is my son okay? Has my son done something? Can someone explain? Like, you want to look at the house? Come on in the house. Here's my phone. Here's this. And he's just kind of readily offering up all this information, trying to make sure his son is okay, trying to figure out what had happened in the moments of the shooting. It was the next day that when he went to the sheriff's office for an interview where they actually started looking at him as a possible suspect. And his attorneys were saying, this isn't really fair. He wasn't in custody. He didn't know he was a suspect. He maybe wouldn't have said so much had he known. And the judge said, I get it, but that's not a valid defense. We will be allowing that evidence into court. But they have a lot of concerns about just statements and things Colin had handed over before he knew he was a criminal suspect in this case. Again, it's the first of its kind. You don't typically see the parent charged in this. It's not something that would necessarily cross your mind.
And you pointed out earlier the state's case hinges on this idea of Colin Gray allegedly acting recklessly, acting negligently. The accusation isn't, the state's position of things isn't that he in any way planned or knowingly contributed to the shooting. Is that right?
Correct. So when I talked to Robert James earlier, he mentioned that, you'll see accomplices criminally charged a lot of times where it's, I'm going to do this. Can you drive the getaway car? I'm going to do this. Okay, I'll give you the gun. None of that is alleged here. There's nothing in the indictment that says he played an active role. It's more of that passive role that he knew there were these concerns. He knew there were mental health issues, possible threats in the past, and didn't do anything to stop it. You shouldn't have provided him that gun because there's these underlying factors. That's something you typically see in civil suits, not something you see so much in the criminal side. So that's where a lot of this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out in court, because you don't often see, well, you didn't do this, so we're going to criminally hold you accountable. A lot of times that would be something civil.
And Grace, you're talking about a case of effectively first impression, is the term of art in the law. You mentioned the Michigan case, but essentially this is unplowed legal ground in Georgia and effectively around the country. How long is this trial expected to take?
In court before, they were saying maybe 2-3 weeks. Of course, they have a very, very, very long witness list. We don't know if they're going to call all of those witnesses. A lot of them might be repetitive, and they might just kind of see where the line of questioning goes. But it will likely last the rest of this month, possibly into March. We'll see kind of where that goes. But in terms of the impact of this case, whatever the verdict is, it's going to set a precedent, like you said, because it is a case of first impression for cases to follow.
And could lead to appellate litigation as well that sets some precedent in the future here in Georgia. Grace, I know you have covered this tragedy from the start. I know you're going to continue to stay on top of it. I know where you will be next week. We know you're going to stay on top of it. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.